You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
I think I've reached that point in the summer where I've just gotten really, really lazy. Like, it is hot, it is humid, and when the weather's like this, I really don't have the energy to plan and prepare and cook the nutritious meals that I need because, listen, I'm in my late 30s and my metabolism ain't what it used to be. And I know I'm not the only one who feels like this. Like my friend Clem, who's been trying out Factor meals for me because she's in the States and, well, I'm here on the Emerald Isle. And she was raving about the marinara and mushroom lasagnette because you know yourself, when you put a pasta dish in the microwave, a lot of the time it can dry out. And zucchinis tend to turn to mush when they're nuked, but the textures in these were absolutely perfect. Every time she makes a meal, she sends me pictures of it, and I am having serious food FOMO. All of Factor meals are designed by chefs and they're dietitian approved. So you get to have a well-balanced diet without compromising on flavour. And they're not frozen, they're always fresh. And best of all, ready in 2 minutes. What are you waiting for? Today is the day to kickstart that healthy routine. And you don't have to worry about lack of choices. With 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you'll always have new flavours to explore. You can treat yourself to restaurant quality meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, and blackened salmon. Head to factormeals.com/whatnow50 and use code WhatNow50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code WhatNow50 at factormeals.com/whatnow50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active.
It's a fact. Heating and air systems are wonderful, right up until they don't work. If your HVAC system is more than 15 years old, or you find yourself making frequent repair calls, it may be time to invest in a new system. Estes Services can help you determine the right course of action and help you save money on your energy bills. Visit estesair.com to schedule your free estimate today. That's estesair.com. Save money and hassles with an estimate from Estes Services today. estesair.com. That's ESTES air.com.
Hello, delicious friends, and welcome to Who Did What Now, the history podcast that's not your history class, with me, your host, Katie Charlwood, history harlot and reader of books. Speaking of books, I was looking at some of the cover mock-ups that the publisher sent me, and this is such a weird place to be at this point. But yeah, it's really exciting and I really love some of the ideas. We're just sort of bouncing things back and forth right now and lots of tweaking, and they can completely change, but it's so interesting to be in this part of the process because it's nice, because I get to do all the writing stuff, but to get sort of on the same side as artistic contribution, which is mainly me going, I like this, but I don't like that, and this colour's fine, but I like this better, and it's really exciting. If you are listening to this on day of release, I am in Dublin. I am chatting with Esme, Louise, James. We are doing an in-conversation with at Hodges and Figgis. If I post some stuff on the socials, yay. Hopefully I will have remembered to do that and will not have forgotten. Huzzah, everybody, huzzah. So yeah, that's my plan. I hope everything is okay. But yeah, that's my plan for that. So, how is everybody? Is everybody excited? I've spent so much money this month, so much money because the kids go back to school and I forgot how much everything cost. It's so expensive. So if anybody feels like donating to my smutty little dress fund, so-called because I think it's funny, feel free to do so. I will greatly appreciate it. But yeah, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, quit your jibber jabber and fact me. In fact you I will. But first, we've got to get our source on. Our sources are Intrigue and Treason, The Tudor Court by David Loades, Bloody Mary by Carolee Erickson, The Sisters Who Would Be Queen, Mary, Katherine and Lady Jane Grey, A Tudor Tragedy by Leanda de Lisle, Lady Jane Grey by Hester Chapman, The Anne Boleyn Files, and of course our old favourites, History.com and Biography.com. Are you sitting comfortably? Good. Then let's begin. So where we last left off was the tragic end of Lady Katherine Grey. So you all know I wanted to talk about the Grey sisters, and it was originally going to be like a Patreon situation, but with My Lady Jane being cancelled on Prime, because apparently Apple is the only place to go now if you want to have at least like a full season or two happen. Yeah. Unless you're making Emily in Paris, which honestly don't know the names of any of the characters apart from Sophie. I know Sophie because she is amazing and I love her, but I know nothing else. Don't know what happened in the plot last year. Will I watch 100 other seasons of it because it's pure escapism and means nothing? Abso-fucking-lutely. So yeah, where we left off, I'm going to give you some cliff notes, I guess, to where we are right now. So Henry VIII, he's married to Catherine Parr at this point. It is 1545. And Lady Mary Grey, she is the third of the Grey sisters, born to Frances Brandon, Mary Tudor's daughter, and Henry Grey. I keep wanting to call him Arthur for some reason, and I don't know why. But yeah, she's the youngest, so Jane is 8 years older than her, and then Catherine is 5 years older than her. So, like, that's a pretty large age gap. I think a lot of it is from them trying, I would assume, to procreate more. But pregnancy in Tudor era is not great. They had this whole, like, shutting in situation, which is really not healthy. And as we know, the number one cause of death for women is men. But the number two cause of death for women is childbirth. So, Also, yes, so when Mary is born, he's married to Catherine Parr. And, luckily, she's already got an older sister called Catherine, so she's not called that. She's probably named after her grandmother as a mark of respect, or the person who they think is going to be the next female, like, closest to the throne. So Henry, he's married to Catherine Parr. 2 years later, he dies. Wee shame, off he goes. Now, Edward VI, the boy king, ascends the throne. Edward is the only child and only legitimate male heir with his wife, Jane Seymour. The only queen he loved enough, mainly because she didn't live long enough to, cause him any problems effectively. She didn't have time to piss him off. So yeah, he has her immortalised in his mind. And Edward is the only legitimate male heir, and so he's the next person to the throne. Now, the way the line of succession worked is he had written Mary, who was Catherine of Aragon's daughter, and Elizabeth, who was Anne Boleyn's daughter, back into the line of succession. So he's got them in it. He had written out Margaret Tudor, his other sister. He'd written out her line because they went to Scotland, and he was like, no. And so he's like, none of them, thank you. Completely buggered that out. Mary, however, Mary's line, he's like, yes, fabulous, wonderful, they are involved. So, super. So Edward, as he was just an arsehole, but he was brought up with terrible advisors who had their own interests. He was just skeezy, man. He was being advised by a lot of skeezy men. And so he ended up making terrible decisions because he was raised in a very particular way. And so naturally, he doesn't want a Catholic on the throne. And he can't put Elizabeth in the line of succession if Mary isn't, because of the way they had all been legitimised. And so he names Lady Jane Grey, his cousin, as his heir. Now, the Grey sisters, anyway, because they were cousins of the king, like, they were already close to the throne and they were perfect bargaining chips for alliances and to have that proximity to the crown. Like, they were there for that. And so they were useful to sort of marry anyway. However, yeah. So she's young, he's on the throne. Now, Mary, Mary Gray, who we are talking about today, as far as I can tell, she had a form of dwarfism, just from the way in which she is described throughout her life. Now, the Gray sisters in general are not tall people, even for the standard of the time. They're known for being short in stature. But the way that Mary is discussed, it's pointed out just how short she is. And the way that her features are mentioned, so it appears that she was a dwarf, And that is the correct term. I've been informed several times. I'm not going to use any derogatory terminology because I don't believe in it. But yeah, so she was very, very short. And so many people felt the need to point this out. So that's what she looks like. But otherwise, she's got your typical Tudor features. The hair, the eyes, very much clearly part of the Tudor family. But for some reason, whenever they're portrayed in a sort of visual medium, they're usually presented as brunettes for some reason. I don't know why. They're all strawberry blondes. They're all sort of reddish tones, and yet we're going to make them all brunette. No. They all look like that. That's the point. So Mary, like her sisters, she is raised in a very Protestant household. So they get taught religion, they get taught humanities, sort of everything that sort of Henry VIII pushed as education. So they also learned languages and music and embroidery, obviously, because all ladies learn embroidery. But music was so important to the Tudor court. It was such a massive part of it. They just had to learn it. And they learned sort of basic science as well. Just enough, So, or just as much as they were willing to teach women at the time. But yeah, so they had a very typical, Tudor education, especially for a family that was in such close proximity to the crown. And of course, when Jane is named Edward's heir, their status is elevated even higher. And so when she's 7, she catches some kind of illness, I don't know, some Tudor sickness, the luggy of whatever. And it's so bad that it almost kills her. But I don't know what it is with these Grey women. They survive some serious hardships. Jane didn't exactly die of natural causes, did she? Anywho, Mary almost dies, defies all odds and survives, because of course she does, absolutely. And then she is betrothed the following year to her cousin, Arthur Grey. And around about this time as well, Jane and Katherine, they get married off in this double marriage, because everyone wants to be connected to them, because if you marry the women, you have control over the women and therefore control over the crown. I think that's their idea here. But yeah, she's 8 years old and betrothed. Now, even in this period, being married at that age, weird and creepy. Now, young marriage is not normal. They're not normal. They're not typical of the era. And I had someone complain a few weeks ago that I was judging it from a modern standard. No. Even during this time period, they found it creepy as fuck, okay? Read contemporary accounts from people. People thought child marriages were weird, as a general consensus. And Arthur Grey, I, in my head, for many years, assumed Arthur Grey was just a cousin, he must be roughly the same age. No. This man was middle-aged. He was a middle-aged man who, he was injured because a pike went through his mouth. It's a whole situation. And I wonder if, because of the way that Mary looked, that perhaps this betrothal happened because they thought, well, she ain't going to get any better, even though people are fickle as fuck, but even though she was so close to the crown. She is the third sister, so she is quite far away from it, so but also there's this whole superstition that it's a whole weird religious thing that if somebody has any abnormality, for example, if they are paralyzed, if they have a disfigurement, if they are a dwarf, for example, that these differences are caused by God or by evil or all this kind of stuff. Like, there's just these weird, superstitious assumptions about it. Anyway, I don't believe in it. I think it's awful and I think it's horrific, but the past is the past and people believe stupid things. That being said, somebody in the last few years tried to cure autism with bleach, so I feel like stupidity hasn't gone away quite just yet. Anyway, Edward dies, Jane ascends the throne, she's there for 9 days, and then Mary Tudor comes in and it's like, that's my seat. And Jane, she was just a prisoner. She didn't want to be queen anyway. And things would have been fine. They probably would have found a way to, get rid of her in a non-murder scenario. But then their father, Mary, Katherine and Jane's, he decides he's gonna, start a rebellion against the queen, which, in a scale of 0 to invading Russia in the winter, is a stupid fucking idea. Naturally, marriages were annulled. The betrothal for Mary and Arthur called off because everyone was like, no, we don't want to be associated with these social pariahs anymore. So they don't want to be connected with that. So Frances, being the smart one she is, that's their mother in case you've forgotten, she's like, oh, we're totally Catholic now. Look at us doing our Hail Marys and counting our rosary beads. Hail Marys and also Hail Mary. Yay, long live the Queen. So Katherine, she sort of accepted into Mary's court, and so she's off doing that. Meanwhile, Frances marries this lowborn dude, Adrian Stark. And so I think we discussed this in the last episode, where it was basically a way of her saying, oh, no more highborn children for me, no more access to the royal line, everything is safe, huzzah, again, God save the Queen. And so she scarpers off. Honestly, I think she just didn't want any more kids anyway, so off they go. And I think Mary goes along with her because when she marries someone lower class, you have to leave court. And so Mary goes along with her because, she's 10 years old and as such has to leave court. So yeah, Frances gets married, leaves court, takes Mary with her because she's 10, and so off she goes with her mum. Now, I think the Grey sisters were treated relatively well at court by Mary as a power move. If nothing else, it was to show that she wasn't going to, tear apart or bring instability to the nobility, I think. By the time that Mary leaves court with Frances and her husband Adrian, it's going to be tough because she's 10 years old and she's already seen her older sister, who she may have not been that close to, because that's a pretty big age gap when you're kids. But her sister and her father were executed by royal decree. That's going to shake things up for you a wee bit, I think. That's going to leave some trauma. But yeah, 10 years old, leaves court, not much information for the next 3 years. But when she's 13, Queen Mary I passes away and Queen Elizabeth I takes over. So 1 year after that, Frances dies, meaning she's only 14 at this point, and she is one of the chief mourners at her mother's funeral. She's one of the people who guard the coffin sort of the 24 hours before the funeral. She's one of those, which I'm sure was a fun thing to do at 14. So when her mum passes away, Mary has a tiny bit of inheritance left by her mum. So she was smart enough to grasp as much as she could, even though the family was in, a huge disgrace and everything else that happened. But a lot of her estate and everything like that had been left to her husband. And so there's a little bit left over for Katherine and for Mary. So Elizabeth, she is on the throne at this point. Mary's got just enough to tide her over. And she is the second in line to the throne at this point. Because after Elizabeth, you've got Katherine, who everyone just calls a younger, hotter version of her. She's just a prettier version of Elizabeth, allegedly. So she's there. And then after her, it's Mary. So officially in the line of succession, these two are next. And because of the way that Elizabeth was, came into the world, the whole Anne Boleyn situation, some people felt like she shouldn't be queen and they wanted to, usurp her throne. And they thought maybe the Grey Girls would be a good way to do it, which, not a smart thing to do. But anyway, so these two are her official heirs, and when she is like freshly crowned, she is paranoid as hell, and she has every right to be, because people are like consistently, plotting against her. But there's, the divine right of kings, queens, whatever, and so there are a lot of people on her side. But yeah, she's suspicious all the time. Now, Elizabeth wasn't an idiot. She was very smart. She was raised by Catherine Parr. She was raised by Anne of Cleves. Like, these were very clever women. So she knew when to show her hand and when not to. So, like, officially, these two are the next in line. Like, before she writes any official sort of thing. And so the two girls, they are brought in to be ladies in waiting for her, because she's smart enough to not rock the boat with this. And so the good thing is for these two, because they're scrimping just on the wee inheritance they've got from Francis's passing, and becoming ladies in waiting brings them like a wage. Like, they have money at this point. They're earning just by having this position. And for the first time in a long, long time, Mary is actually able to treat herself to some nice stuff. Like, she's able to dress better. Like, Queen Elizabeth loved fashion. She loved style. She loved outfits. So did Henry VIII, actually. She seemed to have got that from him, I think. But it's always interesting when you think about the coronation, because she wore Mary's coronation gown when she was crowned. And I think she did this to just reinforce, her legitimacy and the line of succession, and that a queen could be king. No, a queen could rule, But yeah, so Mary's there. She's like really happy to be there. She's like more excited about this. And Katherine is, as we know, being a bit sassy about it, like causing issues, which again, not a smart thing to do. Not a smart thing to do. But Mary's there. She's quite happy. And she's 15 at this point. Now, being the Queen's subjects, being, ladies in waiting, like, in order for them to marry, they need permission of the regent. And so, regnant of the regnant. Apologies. So, wait. Regent? Regnant? God damn it, my brain. Of the ruling person, right? The king or queen. And so Katherine, she gets secretly married to Ned Seymour, because that family can't cause enough problems. And that becomes a whole issue. Elizabeth tries to declare the marriage like invalid, but then Katherine has a son who's declared illegitimate, and then they have another son. Yeah, and so because they had stated the fact that they want to get married, because being betrothed effectively back in this time was just as good as being married. Like, it was a thing. It was what you did. The rest of it was paperwork. So if you did happen to boink during that time, absolutely fine, because God says it's okay. So because they had stated that they wanted to get married and everyone had heard that, and then they had a second child when they were locked in jail together, that officially made this boy, Thomas, the next male heir to the throne. And this is again a patriarchal society in the Tudor era. So of course they're like, So this caused a bit of an issue for Elizabeth specifically, because again, she is unwed and she does not have any heirs. And it was very easy to use her in propaganda, because here she is. She's married. She has 2 heirs. She should be next in line for the throne. And then you've got Elizabeth, who was a childless woman, and they're just like, ooh, she can't do that. Meanwhile, Mary's just there. Because on one side, you've got Catherine Grey, and she is gorgeous. She is like the epitome of like Tudor beauty. She's got the strawberry blonde hair. She's got the striking blue eyes. She's gorgeous. You have Mary, Queen of Scots, lest we forget, who is like 6 feet tall and allegedly also gorgeous. Like, these two women are there. And then you've got Mary, who, the Spanish ambassador, who is an absolute prick, called her crooked back and, what was it, very ugly? Like, sir, I will not take this Mary Grey slander. Like, how horrible. I mean, people are still horrible nowadays, but like, ugh. I hope you get the flu, sir. The flu. But yes, Mary's just there. And she's not really seen as much of a threat in any capacity because, mainly because she's so physically different from those around her, so they don't see her as like this legitimate threat. And also because she's not really causing any waves. Until, of course, she was. Which I think is a good time to get a word from our sponsors.
It's a fact. Heating and air systems are wonderful, right up until they don't work. If your HVAC system is more than 15 years old, or you find yourself making frequent repair calls, it may be time to invest in a new system. Estes Services can help you determine the right course of action and help you save money on your energy bills. Visit estesair.com to schedule your free estimate today. That's estesair.com. Save money and hassles with an estimate from Estes Services today. estesair.com. That's ESTES air.com.
All you need is a few minutes to start your day off with something historic when you listen to the This Day in History podcast. Every day there's a new episode for you to listen and learn about what happened that day way back when. Today could be the day a famous mobster met their end, or the first milestone for humans in space. Who knows what history today holds? Find out when you listen and subscribe to This Day in History wherever you get your podcasts. That's This Day in History wherever you get your podcasts.
And we are back. So, 1565, Mary Grey is 20 years old, and she meets one Mr. Thomas Keyes. So Keyes was a 40-something-year-old sergeant porter in the court. So effectively, he was the guy who would like jump in if people were getting too rowdy and they were causing a commotion and like fights were breaking out. Like, he would just stop it because he is strong and imposing and incredibly trustworthy. Like, he is like, I don't want to say like a bodyguard, but like kinda like a bodyguard for the Queen, but also just there to stop any shit from happening. Like a cop of the court if the cops actually did their jobs. But yeah, he is a very imposing man. He is strong. He is 6'8". I don't care who you are. That is too tall. That is too tall. I have a friend who is 6'7", and I keep joking that we need to like cut off his shins and sew his knees to his feet because he's just too tall. It's too tall. Like, it's difficult to talk to him. I have to crank my neck all the way up. It's very awkward for me. So 20-year-old Mary is courted by Thomas Keyes because like she's a lady in waiting. He's the sergeant porter. They're crossing paths all the time. Like, I think he was married before, I'm assuming death happened to the previous wife, but he's got like a bunch of kids. Like, there's a whole situation. But he's at court and he starts courting her. And this is like the courtly game of love. Like, he's doing it legit. There's like tokens of affection. There's gifts. I'm assuming some poetry is involved. Maybe he wrote the poetry himself. Maybe he got someone else to write it. Like, letters are exchanged. Like, stuff happens. And Mary, not really used to this kind of attention, like, from anyone. But I think it's more than that. Like, she's genuinely flattered by it, and she's a bit taken by Thomas Keyes. So let's bring some context back into this a wee bit. So Mary's older sister, Katherine, had been jailed because she married without the Queen's consent. Her mother, Frances, had managed to marry someone lowborn, so someone below her status, thus removing herself from the line of succession and out of the firing range, basically. Target is off her back. So if Mary was to marry the Sergeant Porter, that is a much lower rank than her and could possibly like just remove her like from that same like firing range, like just move her down a couple of notches and sort of protect her. So she probably thought this would be a good idea and she can marry, she can be safe and also stay on Elizabeth's good side. Meanwhile, Mary Queen of Scots she's a thorn in Elizabeth's side, causing commotions, trying to steal the throne, yada yada yada. And because Mary Queen of Scots was not yet married at this point, Elizabeth was hoping to marry her to Robert Dudley because, yeah, it's her favourite, then she would have that control. Like, she thought this is a great idea. But Mary was not for having it. She marries Lord Darnley, who you may remember from the episode The Mysterious Murder. No, The Mysterious Death of Lord Darnley, Scotland's oldest cold case. Sorry, something got caught in my throat. I think the pollen is messing with me. Like, there's stuff on the trees and it's been a real pain. So anyway, Elizabeth is busy doing a bunch of stuff, and somehow, in a crazy random happenstance, Mary forgets somehow to ask for permission to get married. And so just decides to get married. Like, they elope. They saw what happened to Katherine. They saw this. Like, everyone is aware of what happened to Katherine. Great. And yet she's like, fuck this for a game of soldiers. Let's do it. And they just elope. Like, what? What is wrong with you, Mary? Seriously, did you not look around at the situation and think, maybe this might not be the wisest idea? But no. But yes, instead of waiting for like a decent time and planning this appropriately, they decide to wait till Elizabeth is going to another wedding. That she's going to another wedding with a bunch of her courtiers. And so this is the perfect time to do this. But on the 16th of July, 1656, Mary Grey decides to have a dinner with 3 of her lovely cousins, Margaret Willoughby, the 2 daughters of Lady Stanford, and a servant girl named Frances Goldwell. Now, she didn't want anybody who was too high in status being a witness for the wedding because she didn't want to get them in trouble, which I think is a very sweet thing to do. But she wanted to have enough witnesses for her wedding to ensure that it was legitimate, because the issue with the whole Ned Seymour and Catherine Grey wedding was that it was only Ned's sister Jane who was the witness. And then Jane died, so they didn't have the evidence of that. So she gets this little group together to be witnesses for her wedding. Thomas Keyes manages to get a few people as well, so there's 11 guests in total to this wedding. So there's enough people to witness it, but not witness it too much, lest again they get in trouble because they don't want to get people beheaded, because Elizabeth was a bit more hearty with that than people think she was. There's this assumption that Bloody Mary, as she's called, was this big ruthless consistent murderer, when Elizabeth killed a bunch of people too. It's not just one, they were all beheading people at this point. So Mary Grey and Thomas Keyes, they get married, they have a banquet, there's a feast, everything's great, and then for the next 9-10 days, everything is fabulous. Married, bliss, probably boinking all the time. And I'm sorry, she's so small and he's so large. There's oh no. Oh, well, maybe he just has a small... Oh no. What if this is a cucumber and a coin purse situation? Oofed. Oh, that's how you get a UTI. Oofed. Now, after those 10 days of wedded bliss, how do I put this? Mary Queen of Scots causes a commotion because she marries Lord Darnley, who is objectively just an awful human being. And she ends up writing to Elizabeth going, not going to invade if you name me your heir, which is, again, such a stupid thing to do. So this has got, the hackles up on Elizabeth. So at this point, Elizabeth doesn't want to name Mary Queen of Scots her heir because, just the court wouldn't allow it. Like, her advisors, they were not for this, because they all preferred, like, Catherine Grey to Mary Queen of Scots at this point, especially because Mary Queen of Scots was raised in France to be a French princess, so, like, she didn't have, like, an English connection. Anyway, so this led to Elizabeth not being a super big fan of the Grey sisters at this point. And then the rumour mill sort of swirls around, and she finally finds out that the Sergeant Porter, the dude of the court, has married Mary Grey secretly when she was away. Naturally, Elizabeth is pissed, and she's like, And she's learned her lesson before with, Catherine Grey and Ned Seymour, and so she sends Keyes and Mary Grey to separate prisons. Again, she has learned her lesson. And so the servant girl, Frances Goldwell, gets taken to the Queen. And they're just like, what did you do? This treasonous thing? Were you at this awful event? And she was like, what? She plays dumb, and I love this for her. She's like, she acts like she had no idea what was going on. She was like, well, people were there and they were just standing. I don't know. I didn't realize it was a wedding. Like, she just totally plays it off like whatever. And luckily, Lady Howard, who's her lady, she's like, she is a simpleton. Of course she didn't understand. And so there's this whole thing. She manages to, like, get away with it. Like, she saves her neck. Specifically because she acted like she was just an idiot. Fabulous, Frances. You live another day. 10 points for you, Frances. I love Frances Goldwell. Love her so much. Like, I love the fact that she's pretending to be an idiot just to get by. It's like when Alice of Battenberg has the Nazis, like, raiding her house, and she's like, what? I'm deaf. And she really leans into it, and she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I love it. While, like, dropping ash on his shoes. So yeah, Frances Goldwell lives to talk another day. Well, Frances managed to, like, get away with it. Thomas Keyes was not so successful. So he's the Sergeant Porter. Like, his whole point is being, like, loyal and trustworthy and just, like, being the guy. So when you secretly marry, the Queen's cousin against the Queen's will, yeah, kind of a big deal. And so they put him into a prison called Fleet, and he's in solitary confinement, and he's just in this tiny wee cell because they want to punish him as much as possible because he's 6'8". I'm like, he's all smooshed in, like, he's stuck in this tiny wee cell, he's not allowed to go walking, he can't stretch his legs, like, that's uncomfortable. The best of times for, like, a regular sized human, he's 6'8", the man is practically a giant, like, Andre the Giant, like, because he's not a skinny, scrawny man, because he's a strong soldier person, and he's, he's crunched up in this wee cell, and naturally he's like, he agrees, he's like, if there's an annulment, I'll take it, no worries, because, he's in the court, he saw what happened to Katherine, like, and Ned, and he's like, no, I'll take it. Meanwhile, Mary, she's over in this country house, Chequers, and Hawtrey is the guy who lives there. And he's an old family friend, but, like, she's not supposed to, like, send or receive letters. She's, like, allowed, like, a little bit of walking outside, but, like, there's all of these rules that they have to follow to, like, keep her in check, And remember, at this point, Catherine Grey is also, like, imprisoned, like, somewhere in England. Now, Mary, even though she's not supposed to send and receive letters, she sends a couple of letters trying to just get out, effectively. And she signs them all Mary Grey. She doesn't sign them Mary Keyes because she's like, what marriage? What? Now, unfortunately, because she was smart enough to ensure that there was a fuck ton of witnesses to protect her marriage claim, there was a fuck ton of witnesses to ensure the marriage claim. Like, people had seen the marriage, they witnessed it, and then also they knew the marriage was consummated. So, like, it was very much clear that this had happened and that there was no grounds to like dissolve the marriage. So after 1 year of being in the Fleet prison, this new jailer comes in and he is an absolute shit dirtbag. So Thomas Keyes, he'd been like trying to like hunt birds with a wee slingshot he'd made so that he could like eat at least some decent food. But this new jailer's like, not allowed to do that. And so they give him like rotten meat. Like at one point they even like drop it in like poison, like and other stuff. Like they're like actively trying to kill him. And news of this is somehow getting back to Mary, and she's like, this is not good. I don't like this. And so Mary Grey, she's trying to get him out. And Elizabeth is just like not moving. She's like, not a chance. Done. But she does move Mary from being at Chequers to being with Catherine Willoughby, who is like Mary's step-grandmother. And so she's going to go live with her. And Catherine Willoughby is just like told that Mary's going to come stay with her. And then when Mary shows up, she's genuinely shocked because she's sort of scrubby and stuff. Like she doesn't have like nice attire or any belongings, you know. And she's like, well, I was sort of in prison and because of this, yada, yada, yada. And she used to be like sort of opinionated and she was just full of gumption and excitement. And Catherine was like, this is weird. And then Mary just goes through this like depression and she's not eating. Like the same thing that Catherine Grey did. It's just like not eating out of depression, just like starving herself. And like Queen Mary I, like she did the same thing. They would just like not eat. And she's just not doing well. And like Catherine Willoughby is like writing to everybody saying that this is happening. And Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth, she is kind of counting on this. Because meanwhile, in a move that surprises absolutely no one, Mary Queen of Scots, her husband, again, dies in a mysterious accident. And then she marries this awful dude who may or may not have killed her husband and also may or may not have kidnapped her and forced a marriage upon her. Like, those are things that may have happened. And this is a whole situation and she really wants to be the heir and Elizabeth's like, maybe. But also she wants to be in a position where Mary Grey cannot like cause a scene and rally people behind her. And so she wants to keep her down. And so Catherine Willoughby, like her kids are in their teens, Peregrine and Bertie, I think they are. And they're hoping that this is going to like boost Mary's spirits up. But she's not really having it, but Catherine's trying to do it. And so Elizabeth doesn't want Mary's spirits to be lifted in any capacity, and so she removes her from Catherine Willoughby's household. And so she gets chucked into another country house, another house arrest, mansion arrest, castle arrest, one of those, with the Greshams, Thomas and Anne. Now, Thomas Gresham, quite happy to have Mary there. He was in a considerable amount of pain because he broke his leg, it wasn't set properly, and he was just like in consistent agony all the time. And he was also visually impaired as well. And Anne did not like Mary being there, apart from the fact that whoever like hosted, and I say that generously, whoever hosted Mary had to pay for her stuff, right? Because Elizabeth wasn't gonna be paying for that, because why would she? She just like sets the whole situation and lets it happen. And Anne ends up calling Mary, was like the heart and sorrow of her life. Because she like can't go places, because she has to stay and look after Mary. Luckily the Greshams are like rich enough to cover the cost of stuff, but Anne still ain't keen on that though. And so because Anne and Mary aren't getting along, because Anne is just mad that she's there, like the couple, so Thomas and Anne, their marriage is like worsening for it. And so they write to try and get Mary sent away. And it takes a while for this to happen. Meanwhile, Thomas Keyes doesn't die from poisoned meat and is finally released from jail and manages to get a job in Kent, basically doing soldiery security stuff, right? Like his kids from his first marriage, like they were around this area, so he's near them, so he probably has that kind of support. And he writes to the Queen and he writes to sort of council, trying to get permission to visit Mary. I mean, who he hasn't seen in 4 years, granted, but he still considers her his wife, probably because she is legally his wife. And Elizabeth's just like, no. Computer says no. This may have been due to the fact that Catherine Grey had passed away, and as such, Mary was now the official, legal, next in line to the throne after Elizabeth. And obviously she doesn't want to throw that dog a bone. But he tries for 2 years to try and reunite with his wife, and then he dies. Basically he had a bunch of health issues from being in prison and being fed, rotten, poisoned meat. That will have an effect on you, being in a cramped, damp, area. It will, not great. Not great for you. So he passes away, meaning that Mary Grey is now a widow and is no longer married. Now, Mary is not told of her husband's passing right away. They want to make sure they get a doctor in to be there because they're like, this is going to upset her. So they bring a doctor in and they finally announce, the information. Yeah. Good thing he was there. Good thing he was there because she was not doing great with that information. And so the Greshams, they write to Queen Elizabeth. They're like, can she wear mourning garb? Can she do this? And Elizabeth again is just like, no. And then, in a stubborn move, all this time, Mary was signing her letters like Mary Grey, every single time. But then she writes to Queen Elizabeth and she signs her letters Mary Keys. That's a great idea. You're not going to allow me to mourn properly. Well, how about this? And her stubborn streak is so back. It's so back. And she's causing such issues. The Greshams at this point are desperate to get rid of her. He's writing letter after letter please get rid of her. Please get rid of her. I need her gone. Dear God, get her out of here. Then in 1572, Elizabeth has Mary Grey released. Now she does this to kind of win favour at court, because at one point they're like, well, you could be nice to Mary Queen of Scots, and she's like, oh no, because she's trying to steal my throne, let's not do that. And so she's like, let's free Mary Grey, hooray. This was also helped by the fact that even though Mary Queen of Scots would have had certain supporters being Catholic and whatnot, Mary Grey didn't really have any support at court. Nobody really wanted her to be queen. Nobody really was into that. And so she wasn't really a threat to Elizabeth's reign. Because anybody that would have supported Mary at this point were now supporting the male heirs, which would have been Catherine's sons. So they were more focused on that instead of Mary. Now, because she'd been under house arrest for so long, she hadn't had access to her inheritance or anything like that. And it wasn't returned to her once she was freed. But she goes and she asks the Queen, can I have my money? And she allows her to have a small allowance. So Mary, she's free. She's got all her books and a teeny tiny allowance. And she heads to Adrian Stokes, her former stepfather. He's remarried at this time to Lady Throckmorton. She's got 7 kids from a previous marriage. Because it's the Tudor era that people are always remarrying. Now, I've said it before and I'll say it again. People bring up the idea of the nuclear family as the typical traditional thing, but blended families, they've existed for hundreds, thousands of years. It's so normalized. And because men would die in war, there was all the diseases, of course, and women dying of everything. And so a lot of blended families were happening. So Mary moves in with the Throckmortons and the Stokes and just all of them. And luckily, Lady Throckmorton had known Mary when she was wee, and so she was very welcoming to her into the household. And so after living there for a year or so, Mary had saved up enough money to set up her own household. I think she saved her allowance or something, whatever she did. Maybe she sold some books, whom's to say, but She's 27 and she just is out to go live her best life. So Mary, she's free, she's got her own household, and she is just like having acquaintances and friends. Like she's chatting to like the Willoughbys and the Berties, and even though she wasn't allowed to take custody of Thomas Key's kids, like she still sort of connects with them and she becomes very friendly with them, including his daughter Jane Merrick, and she ends up becoming like godmother to like one of her kids. And she manages to also connect with sort of former people from court from when she was a lady in waiting. So she connects with them, and Ned Seymour, who's like Catherine's widower, like all of these. And like Mary ends up sending like a gift to Queen Elizabeth. So she sends her some bracelets and the Queen accepts them, which is a really big deal because it shows that, you know, she's not so against Mary anymore, that there's no like at least obvious animosity there. And this is like reinforced by the fact that Mary is then given a portion of the income from like the Grey lands. So because when the Greys, whenever they had been like imprisoned and whatnot, the crown like took ownership of their estates and whatnot. So the money they would have earned from that was brought back into the crown. But now Elizabeth is gifting, well yeah, she's given that back to Mary to have like not all of it, but like a wee bit of it, like enough for her to live her fabulous life. And for the first time in a long time, like she can afford the finer things in life. So she's able to like run her household with all the stuff that she wants. She's able to buy gowns and jewellery and have things like couture, like it is made for her. And so it's all made for them, obviously, because like, but still it's like the best of the best. And clearly she does so well, like working up the ranks, that she becomes a maid of honour for the Queen. Like she is doing so well. Now the year after she becomes the Queen's maid of honour, like a year after this, the plague just ravages through London. And Mary, like she's worried. She draws up her will. Like she gets ill, and so she's like really just putting everything in place. She was given Francis Brandon's like jewels and stuff, and so she ends up sending them to like her step grandmother, to Catherine Willoughby, and so she sends like stuff to Throckmorton, sort of Adrian Stroke's wife, and she just gives things to like money and plates and whatnot to her goddaughter Mary Merrick, who's like Jane Merrick's daughter. And so she ends up giving away all this stuff. Like she has, all of it is connected to people that matter to her, which I think is very lovely. And she then, so ill, passes away at the age of 33 on the 20th of April 1578. Now, unlike the rest of her siblings, Mary gets an amazing funeral. Like, the Queen grants her to have a funeral in Westminster Abbey. Like, that is a big deal, especially for Elizabeth to do so, because she didn't allow it for a bunch of them. Like, she deliberately, like, didn't have these because she was not supporting them. She wasn't validating this. And so, yeah, she has her funeral in Westminster Abbey. The Countess of Kent is the chief mourner. And she is buried in Francis Brandon's tomb in Westminster Abbey. Now, unlike any of the other Grey sisters, Mary never made a claim for the throne. She never suggested that she would be. Like, she tried to pull herself out of the line of succession. Like, she actively tried to not do that. Like, not that Jane Grey ever wanted the throne. That was kind of thrust upon her. But she personally never made the claim. And so ends the tale of the three Grey sisters. And if you liked my retelling of this story, feel free to rate and review 5 stars. And if you didn't like it, don't say anything mean about me because I'll cry. But yeah, I'm hoping to see people at Dublin tomorrow. That'd be amazing. Not tomorrow. Today. I forgot what day it was. Anyway, I hope to see you all there. It's recommendation time, I guess, for watching. I'm going to do watching first. Like, I rewatched The Marvels last night with my little girl. I was watching it, and it was... Not every movie needs to be a thought-provoking, like, cinema-bending experience. Like, sometimes movies can just entertain. So, you know what? Go watch that. It's fun. It's got 3 women in it, and they're all connected in a weird, special way. And it's just fun. It's just good fun. For listening, you know what? If you're not already listening to the Murder Most Irish podcast, if you like true crime, I'm throwing a true crime thing here. The girls in Colin, fabulous, amazing, love them, 10 out of 10. I've probably recommended them before, I don't care. I'm doing it again, so go deal with them. And then, finally, she says, for reading, you should read Kinky History by Esme James. And not just because I'm going to her book launch, but you should absolutely read her book. She is amazing. Esme is actually an absolute darling. I adore her. And y'all just need to understand how fabulous she is. And if you don't understand how fabulous she is, I can't help you, I don't think. But I hope to see some of you there. Let me know if you've made it. Otherwise, I'm going to say farewell, actually, to everyone. Adios, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen, my friends. Bye-bye.
Do you find it hard to sleep at night? Then the Sleep Cove podcast can help you. Hi, I'm Christopher Fitton, the voice and clinical hypnotherapist behind Sleep Cove. Sleep Cove features sleep hypnosis, meditations and bedtime stories, all designed to help those of you who struggle at night to achieve a restful and peaceful night's sleep. Search for Sleep Cove on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and see why Sleep Cove helps millions of people sleep deeply all night long.